If you had told me a year ago that half my family would boycott my wedding because I refused to stay silent about a 4-year-old being hurt, I would have laughed. I would have said my family wasn't perfect, but they weren't cruel. I would have said loyalty meant something. I would have said my father, of all people, would stand with me when a child was in danger. But I was wrong about so many things. My name is Riley. I'm 28 years old, and in less than 2 months, I'm supposed to walk down the aisle and marry the man I love. I should be thinking about flowers and vows and first dances. I should be choosing earrings, not attorneys. I should be worrying about seating charts, not police reports. But here I am, rewriting every definition I've ever had of the word family. Because my stepmother, Patricia, hit my 4-year-old nephew so hard his lip split open. Because I pressed charges. Because my father said I was overreacting. Because he told half the family the story he preferred, not the truth. And now, my wedding guest list has been sliced clean down the middle. Now, people I grew up with, people who watched me blow out birthday candles and graduate school and bury my mother, people who should know me, have decided I'm hysterical, dramatic, vindictive. All because I chose to protect a child. But this isn't just about one moment. It isn't just about one slap, one cry, one streak of blood on a tiny shirt. This started years ago, long before I ever became a mother, before I took custody of my little nephew Connor, before I met Miguel, the man I'm about to marry. Long before Patricia ever tried to run my life the way she ran every party, every holiday, every room she walked into. I didn't know it then, but the woman my father married would become the center of a storm that would swallow our family whole. And I would be forced to choose, stay silent to keep the peace, or speak up and lose the people I once thought were unlosable. I chose the truth. And the fallout is still burning. Before I tell you what happened that day, the screaming, the blood, the betrayal, I need to take you back. Because none of this makes sense unless you understand how we got here. This story didn't begin in my living room. It began years earlier, with a marriage, a child, and a woman who needed control more than she needed compassion. My name is Riley, I'm 28, and on paper my life looks solid. I work as a project coordinator for a mid-size construction company. It's not glamorous, but it's steady, and I'm good at it. I color code spreadsheets, negotiate with suppliers, and spend way too much time in steel-toed boots arguing about deadlines with foremen twice my age. I come home to a small house with a worn-in couch, toys scattered across the living room, and a kitchen table that always has at least one crayon welded to it by mystery glue. I live there with Miguel, my fiancé, our 16-month-old son Daniel, and a 4-year-old who calls me Riley but feels every bit like my child, Connor. When people ask how many kids we have, I always hesitate for half a second. 1.5, I used to joke, but the truth is, in my heart, it's 2. Miguel and I met in 2019 at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. I was the one standing by the food table, pretending to be fascinated by the potato salad to avoid small talk. He was the guy making my nephew laugh by turning hot dog buns into puppets. When he finally walked over to introduce himself, there was mustard on his sleeve, a dimple in his smile, and something in his eyes that felt safe. We started dating a few weeks later. It wasn't some whirlwind romance with violins and grand gestures. It was quieter than that, consistent. He texted when he said he would. He showed up on time. He listened. After a long line of men who loved the idea of me more than the reality, Miguel felt like a calm harbor. Back then, Connor was just a baby in photos Miguel kept on his phone. "This is my little brother," he'd say, voice softening in a way I didn't understand yet. Half-brother, technically, from my dad's side, but labels don't matter. He's mine. Connor's parents, Miguel's father and his second wife, died in a car accident when Connor was only 7 months old. When Miguel told me, we'd only been dating a few months. We were sitting in his car in a grocery store parking lot, the windows fogged from the rain, Daniel not even a concept yet. "The day I got that call," he said quietly, fists clenched on the steering wheel, "I thought I was going to throw up and disappear at the same time." He fought for custody. There were meetings with social workers, inspections, forms that needed forms attached to them. By the time the court granted him full custody, Connor was almost a year old. By that time, I was already spending most of my weekends at Miguel's place, helping with late-night feedings, learning how to heat up bottles without scalding them, and becoming intimately familiar with the sound of Connor's different cries. I still remember the first time Connor reached for me instead of Miguel. We were in the park, the grass damp under our blanket. Miguel had gone to throw away some trash. Connor wobbled in my lap, big brown eyes tracking Miguel for a few seconds. Then he turned back to me, grabbed at my shirt, and tucked his face under my chin. Something shifted inside my chest that day and never shifted back. By early 2021, Miguel and I were engaged. It was simple, no orchestra, no grand gestures. Just the two of us on our couch after Connor finally passed out in his crib. Miguel pulled a small box from between the couch cushions, hands shaking. I laughed when I realized he'd been sitting on it all night. "Riley," he said, eyes shining, "this is already a family. Will you make it official and marry me anyway?" I said yes with my whole body. We started planning a small wedding. Then life, as it tends to do, changed the timeline. I found out I was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't exactly an accident. We talked about having a baby together someday. We just didn't expect someday to show up between cake tastings and venue tours. My hands trembled when I showed Miguel the positive test. Connor sat on the kitchen floor, smashing cereal crumbs into the tiles while Miguel pulled me into his arms and laughed, half in disbelief, half in joy. "We'll figure it out," he whispered into my hair. "We always do." We postponed the wedding. Daniel arrived screaming and perfect, and our lives rearranged themselves around midnight feedings and nap schedules and laundry that seemed to multiply in the dark. Connor took to being a big brother with an intensity that made my heart ache, fetching diapers, patting Daniel's head a little too enthusiastically, insisting on sleeping with one of Daniel's tiny socks clutched in his hand. To us, they were both our boys. Biology didn't matter in the way our house felt. What did matter, what would end up mattering more than I realized, was how the rest of my family chose to see them, especially my father's wife, Patricia. My mother died when I was 11. Cancer. One week there were casseroles and whispered phone calls. The next week there was a closed casket and a black dress that didn't fit right. My father remarried quickly to a woman who lasted 3 years before the marriage imploded. Then came Patricia. She swept into our lives like she was auditioning for a role. Perfect hostess, perfect wife, perfect stepmother. My younger sister, Hannah, and I never liked her, but we bit our tongues because Dad seemed happy. For the first time in years, he laughed at the dinner table again. Patricia loved throwing parties. Birthdays, holidays, graduations. If there was an excuse to send out invitations, she grabbed it. She called herself an event planner, despite never being paid a cent. Every gathering became her stage. She coordinated color schemes like she was planning a royal wedding, then sulked if anyone didn't gush enough over the napkin rings. "Just humor her," my dad would say whenever I grimaced. He used that word a lot. Humor her. Like she was a temperamental child we all had to tiptoe around. Patricia had a son from her first marriage, Marcus, 1 year older than me. He lived with his dad most of the time and only showed up on some weekends and holidays. We were never close, but we weren't enemies either. Just two people orbiting the same exhausting planet named Patricia. By the time Miguel, Connor, and later Daniel came into the picture, Patricia's need to control everything had hardened into something darker. The first time she met Connor, she smiled too wide and called him the charity case. I laughed it off as a bad joke. I shouldn't have. Because while my extended family fell in love with Connor, my aunts fussing over his curls, my uncles letting him help grill, my cousins taking turns pushing him on the swing, Patricia watched from the edges, eyes sharp and mouth tight. Every time someone bent down to hug him, her jaw tightened a little more. Looking back, the warning signs were there, woven into every holiday she tried to hijack, every snide comment about real family, every time my father told us to just go along with it. I just didn't know yet that all those little cracks were leading straight to the moment she would raise her hand against my son. Or that when I finally said, "No more," my own father would stand beside her instead of me. I used to believe tension in families built like storm clouds, slow, heavy, warning you long before the first crack of thunder. But with Patricia, the storms came disguised as sunshine, compliments laced with toxins, smiles sharpened like blades, and my father, caught somewhere between denial and convenience, pretended not to feel the rain. Things began shifting the moment Miguel and I officially set our wedding date for July. At first, I was excited. After postponing the ceremony because of Daniel's birth, it felt like life was finally settling into something hopeful, a fresh start. a season of celebration. Everyone we loved would come together to witness our little family becoming official. But Patricia had other plans. She stepped into the process like she'd been waiting her entire life to run a wedding that wasn't hers. At first, she did it quietly, asking questions that felt innocent, offering suggestions that were actually directives. Then she escalated. One morning, I woke up to 8 missed calls and 3 voicemails from our wedding planner. Patricia had contacted her without asking me and tried to change the floral arrangements. She insisted on being involved in all major decisions because she didn't want anything tacky to ruin her reputation. Her reputation for my wedding. Miguel found me in the kitchen listening to the voicemails, my hands shaking around my coffee mug. "Baby," he said gently, taking the mug from me before I spilled it, "you don't have to let her bulldoze you." I laughed humorlessly. "Tell that to my dad. He thinks we should just humor her." That word again. Humor her. As if I hadn't spent over a decade tiptoeing around Patricia's ego. But nothing compared to her behavior toward Connor. She hated him. I don't use that word lightly. I don't use it carelessly. But Patricia resented the way my family adored him. Resented how effortlessly he fit into every gathering. Resented how people whispered things like, "He's such a sweet kid," and "Miguel is doing such an incredible job." Patricia's approval had always come with strings attached. Praise only given when she could take credit for something. With Connor, she couldn't, and so she rejected him. Little things at first. She would brush past him at parties without acknowledging him, scowl when he laughed too loudly, turn away when he ran toward her with a drawing clutched in his tiny hands. Then her comments sharpened. "He's not really family," she said once, sipping wine on my father's patio, as if discussing the weather. "He's Melissa's responsibility, not ours," she muttered another time, conveniently forgetting that Daniel, my biological son, was sitting in the same stroller Connor was pushing. Every time she said his name, it dripped with disdain. When she learned that Connor would be a ring bearer in our wedding, her expression twisted like she'd just bitten into something rotten. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "You're giving him a role meant for actual family? What will people think?" I stared at her, stunned. "We think of him as our son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, I don't," she replied bluntly, "and neither should anyone else." That was the moment something cold and electric crawled down my spine. Because her hatred wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't masked behind passive-aggressive party planning. It was sharp, bold, unfiltered. But my father, who had once knelt beside me as I sobbed at my mother's grave, simply said, "She doesn't mean anything by it, sweetheart. Patricia just wants to feel included." Included, as if excluding a child was her version of belonging. Connor didn't understand her cruelty, not really, but he could feel it. Children always can. He'd cling closer to Miguel at family events, reach for my hand more often, bury his face in my shoulder when Patricia raised her voice across a room. And each time something inside me tightened, a warning, a feeling I kept pushing aside. Because this was my wedding year, because Daniel was barely sleeping through the night, because Miguel and I were juggling 2 jobs, 2 kids, and 1,000 tiny responsibilities. Because I wanted peace. But peace was never possible where Patricia was involved. And the storm she'd been quietly brewing was about to break open in a way none of us could come back from. 3 weeks before everything came crashing down, Miguel and I had a rare Sunday afternoon planned, just the 2 of us. A quiet lunch, maybe a walk if the Texas heat didn't melt us first. His brother and sister-in-law, who usually watched the kids, were out of town. We were about to cancel our plans when my father called. "I can watch the boys," he offered. Only him. He emphasized it. Something in my chest tightened, not quite fear, not quite suspicion, but unease. "Okay," I said finally. "But at our house, Dad, not yours, and Patricia isn't to come with you." A pause, just long enough for dread to form, then, of course. But I didn't believe him, not fully. After we settled the boys with snacks and toys, I walked to the living room shelf and took down the small nanny cam we used when babysitters came over. I placed it discreetly behind a plant. I didn't tell Miguel. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't know what I was looking for. I only knew that every instinct in me whispered that Patricia wouldn't honor boundaries she didn't believe should exist. When we left the house, Connor was giggling on the floor with Daniel, stacking blocks and knocking them down to the sound of Daniel's delighted squeals. It was such a normal morning. So normal that I clung to it like proof that everything would be okay. It wasn't. We were gone for 3 hours. When we walked through the door, the world shattered in a single breath. Both boys were crying. not fussing. Crying, that deep, panicked wail that vibrates in a child's ribs. Patricia's voice hit me first. Spoiled, ungrateful little brat. Crying for attention. That's all you ever... She was red-faced, towering over Connor, who clutched his mouth with both hands, tears streaking down his cheeks. Blood stained the collar of his shirt. My heart stopped. Miguel was the first to move, vaulting over the baby gate to grab Daniel from the playpen. I went straight to Connor. What happened? My voice barely worked. Patricia spun around like she'd been waiting for an audience. He was whining all afternoon. He needed to learn respect. Miguel's head snapped up. Where is my dad? He demanded. My father stood frozen in the corner of the room, silent, small, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the wallpaper. Connor whimpered and pressed his face into my shoulder. I felt the warmth of his blood against my dress. I faced my father. Did she hit him? He swallowed, hesitated. And in that hesitation, I felt everything inside me tilt. Then she slapped him once, as if the number diluted the violence, as if the fraction changed the fact that a grown woman had struck a 4-year-old child. My stomach rolled. Get out, I whispered. Both of you, now. But Patricia wasn't done. Oh, please, she scoffed, folding her arms. He cried because I told him he wasn't going to be in the wedding. You two have been filling his head with nonsense. He is not family. He never will be. Connor's tiny fingers dug into me, trembling. Miguel's breath hitched, a sound I'd never heard from him. He stepped forward, shaking with rage. Out! Now! Patricia's eyes flashed with something triumphant, like she'd been waiting for this moment, craving the chaos she could then blame on us. You're ungrateful, she snarled. Both of you. I've tried to help. I've tried to make this wedding respectable, and you let that child ruin everything. Get out, I screamed. Silence. Even the boys hiccuped into stillness. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, muttering about people who don't understand discipline. My father lingered. Riley, sweetheart, he's fine. You're blowing this out of... I turned and stared at him the way you stare at a stranger who has no right to say your name. You stood there, I said quietly. You watched her hit him. You let her tell him he wasn't family. You let him cry in fear. And you did nothing. He flinched. She didn't mean... Dad, leave. He opened his mouth again. But whatever excuse he planned died when Miguel stepped beside me, shoulders squared, eyes filled with fury. My father looked at us, his daughter, his future son-in-law, the 2 children he claimed as grandchildren, and chose the coward's exit. He walked out behind Patricia. The door slammed. The house fell painfully silent except for Connor's soft sobs against my neck. I held him tighter than I'd ever held anyone in my life. Miguel met my gaze. His were wet. Mine burned. We're going to fix this, he whispered, voice raw. We're going to protect them. But I already knew. This wasn't something you fix. This was a line crossed, so violently, so deliberately, that everything before it would be divided from everything after. And the after would change all of us. The moment the front door closed behind my father and Patricia, the world felt too quiet. Not peaceful, hollow, like the air itself had been scooped out of my lungs. I carried Connor to the bathroom while Miguel rocked Daniel against his chest. My hands were shaking so hard, it took 3 tries to turn on the light. When I finally got a clear look at Connor's lip, something inside me splintered. A swollen line of red, a clean split in the delicate skin, dried blood crusted at the corner. And the worst part? The way his eyes avoided mine, like he thought he'd done something wrong. Sweetheart, I whispered, crouching to his level. Did Patricia hurt you? He hesitated, not because he was confused, because he was afraid. Miguel appeared in the doorway, silent but solid, Daniel asleep on his shoulder. Our eyes met over Connor's small body. I saw the same thing in his expression that I felt in my chest. Fury, guilt, heartbreak. Connor finally nodded. Did you cry? I asked gently. Another nod, a tiny sob escaped him. My throat closed. I pulled him into my arms, careful of his lip, careful of everything. I felt the tremor in his little body, the uneven rhythm of his breathing as he pressed his face into my collarbone. I'm sorry, he whispered. It shattered me. Miguel knelt beside us. No, buddy, no, you did nothing wrong. Nothing. But Connor didn't look convinced. How could he be? A woman who claimed to be part of our family had told him he wasn't worthy of love, then hit him to make sure he believed it. And my father, had stood there and watched. We settled the boys for a nap, though Connor clung to me like he was terrified I'd disappear. I held him until his breathing steadied, until his lashes fluttered against his cheeks. Only when both boys were finally asleep did the weight of what happened hit me fully. I sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on my knees, hands pressed to my forehead. My pulse felt like it was echoing through my skin. My mind kept replaying the moment we walked into the house, the screaming, the blood, Connor's eyes wide with terror. Miguel sat next to me, not touching me, not crowding me, just there, his presence grounding, like a warm hand on the back of my heart. "Talk to me," he said softly. But how could I put all of it into words? "I should have known," I whispered. "I should have trusted my instincts. I should never have let Dad come over today. Miguel reached for my hands, stilling them. "Riley, stop. You didn't do this. Patricia did." I swallowed hard, and my father let her. He looked away, jaw tightening. That was the part cutting deepest. Patricia hurting Connor was unforgivable. But my father whom I'd loved even when he didn't deserve it, had stood silent. He had seen a child cry in fear and chosen loyalty to his wife over basic decency. "I keep wondering," I said, voice trembling, "if I should have spoken up years ago, if I should have set firmer boundaries, if—" "No." Miguel's voice sharpened. "You've bent over backwards to keep the peace. You've accommodated her, tolerated her, swallowed your own feelings to protect this family. You didn't create this. She did." My breath hitched. Then why does it feel like I failed? Miguel brushed a tear off my cheek before I even realized it had fallen. "Because you care. That's not failure." I leaned into him then, letting my forehead rest against his shoulder. The exhaustion hit me like a wave, layers of fear, guilt, anger, all crashing together. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. Miguel gently tilted my chin up. "We protect our kids. That's what we do, whatever it takes." His certainty steadied me. For the first time since walking through the door, I felt a flicker of clarity. "We have the nanny cam," I murmured. "We should check it." Miguel nodded. "Let's do it." We watched the footage together. The camera didn't capture the exact slap. Connor had been just out of frame, but the audio was unmistakable. Patricia's voice, sharp and venomous. "You are not family. You don't belong in the wedding." Connor crying, begging her to stop yelling, and then a smack. Loud. Impossible to misinterpret. Miguel's hand clenched into a fist. I felt bile rise in my throat. Then came the worst part. Patricia telling him to stop being dramatic as he whimpered and held his bleeding lip. When the video ended, the room felt suffocating. Miguel stood abruptly. "We're filing a report." I nodded slowly, my pulse thunderous. "Yes, we are. Because this didn't just cross a boundary, it obliterated it. And if my father wanted to pretend otherwise, then he was choosing his wife over his own grandchildren. And I was choosing the truth. Filing the police report should have made me feel empowered, vindicated, decisive, like a mother protecting her children and a woman reclaiming control over her life. But instead, as I sat in that cramped police station, fluorescent lights humming overhead, I felt small. Miguel sat beside me, one knee bouncing with barely contained anger. Connor rested sleepily against my chest, his lips swollen but healing. Daniel sat in his stroller, sucking on a pacifier and blinking up at the ceiling lights like nothing in the world could be wrong. I envied him. The officer listened carefully, asked questions gently, and watched the nanny cam footage with a tightening jaw. When he finally said, "You have enough evidence for charges," the words hit me like a physical blow. It was real now. It was official. There was no going back. Patricia would have a child abuse charge on her record. And my father would blame me. He didn't disappoint. 2 days later, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen, and my stomach clenched reflexively. Miguel looked at me, silently asking if I was ready. I wasn't, but I answered anyway. "Riley," my father said, his voice sharp enough to cut. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I closed my eyes. "Dad!" "You ruined Patricia's life," he snapped. "Over nothing. Over a tantrum from that boy." "That boy?" I repeated softly. My pulse quickened. "His name is Connor, and he's 4, and she hit him." "She barely touched him," he said dismissively. "You're exaggerating, and now you've dragged the police into this." "Dad, she split his lip." "Kids get hurt all the time," he barked. "Why are you doing this to us?" Us. Not Connor, not me, not the family he claimed to treasure. Us meant him and Patricia. And for the first time, I realized that no truth, no video, no doctor's report, no evidence would outweigh his loyalty to her. "Dad," I whispered, "she hurt a child. She told him he wasn't family. She made him sob, and you watched." He went silent for a beat. Then he said the words I will never forget. "If Patricia isn't welcome at your wedding, then neither am I." My breath caught. "Dad!" But the line was already dead. I sat there staring at my phone, hands trembling. Miguel took it gently from my grasp and placed it on the table. "Hey," he murmured, "look at me." I looked. His eyes were steady, warm, angry for me, not at me. "You didn't do this," he said. "Your father did, and Patricia did." But it didn't feel like that. It felt like I detonated something. The next few days unfolded like an avalanche. Phone calls, voicemails, text messages, all from relatives on my father's side. Most of them started the same way. "Riley, your dad said," or, "Why would you ban him and Patricia just because of some wedding disagreement?" They had no idea what actually happened. No mention of the slap. No mention of the blood. No mention of the charges. My father had rewritten the narrative, recasting himself as the victim, and Patricia as the misunderstood stepmother whose only crime was trying too hard to help. And because most of them had never liked Miguel, because Connor wasn't blood, it was easy for them to believe the lie. I felt myself unraveling, piece by piece, until I stopped taking calls. Instead, I reached out to the people I could still trust, my cousins, the ones who actually knew me. I sent them the pediatrician's report, the police report, the screenshots, the audio clip. One by one, their replies came in. "What the hell? I'm so sorry. We'll be there. We should have known your father was lying." But there were others who doubled down, who said I was overreacting, who insisted Patricia was old-fashioned and stern, but not abusive, who refused to believe evidence because it was easier to believe the story that demanded nothing of them. I wrote them off, all of them, for good. The closer we got to the wedding, the more vicious the situation became. Patricia sent email after email to the court, arguing that she had only acted in self-defense because Connor lunged at her. A transparent lie, disproven by the footage, but she sent it anyway. My father left a voicemail saying, "You're choosing that boy over your own father." That boy. I cried for an hour after hearing it. Not for myself, for Connor, for how deeply a single sentence could wound a child if he ever heard it. Miguel heard the voicemail too. He wrapped me in his arms, resting his chin on top of my head. "He is our son," Miguel said quietly, "and we will never let anyone make him feel otherwise." Hannah, my sister, was furious on our behalf. She confronted our father and told him plainly, "You're wrong." He hung up on her too. We filed for the restraining order shortly after. The hearing was brutal in ways I didn't expect. Patricia sat there seething while my father defended her with a desperate, slouched posture that made him look smaller than I'd ever seen him. The judge saw the evidence, he heard the audio, he read the pediatric report, and he granted the order. Patricia wasn't allowed within 500 feet of us or our home. My father looked at me with a rage I didn't recognize, as if I were the one who had done something unforgivable. But for the first time, something inside me clicked. I wasn't the one destroying this family. I was the one saving mine. Still, the guilt clung to me like smoke. Because even when you're right, even when you're protecting a child, standing against your own blood hurts in ways you can't prepare for. And the real explosion was still coming. Because the wedding, the event Patricia so desperately wanted to control, was approaching. And Patricia wasn't the type to accept being told no. Not when she still believed she could win. The week before the wedding should have been filled with last-minute fittings, happy nerves, and excited messages from friends planning surprises. Instead, my days blurred into a haze of dread. I kept waiting for the next blow. And it came. Not from Patricia this time, but from the people I once believed would never turn their backs on me. I was standing in the kitchen folding Daniel's tiny socks when my phone buzzed on the counter, a voicemail from my aunt, one of the relatives who hadn't chosen sides yet. I pressed play, expecting reassurance. Instead, her voice sliced through me. "Riley, I just spoke with your father. He's devastated. He said you exaggerated everything about Patricia and punished her for trying to help. I don't want to believe he would lie, but you know how emotional things get with children. Maybe it wasn't as serious as you're making it seem. Maybe you should consider apologizing before the wedding." Apologizing. My knees nearly buckled, but she wasn't finished. "Your father says he refuses to attend unless Patricia is welcomed back. And honey, if he's not coming, we won't be there either. You only get one wedding day. Don't ruin it out of stubbornness." The message ended. I stared at my reflection in the microwave door, eyes rimmed red, shoulders slumped, Daniel's socks limp in my hand, and felt a cold, creeping numbness seep into my bones. Miguel walked in a moment later and took one look at me. "What happened?" he asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just held the phone out. He listened, his jaw clenched with each sentence. When the voicemail ended, he exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "She wants you to apologize to the woman who hit our son," he whispered. Disbelief and anger braided in his voice. "I don't even feel human right now," I said quietly. "It's like everything I thought I knew about this family was a lie." Miguel stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. His warmth should have helped, but nothing reached the icy center forming inside my chest. Because this wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about losing the foundation I'd been standing on my whole life. Later that night, after the boys fell asleep, I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark. No lights, no noise except the hum of the fan, just me and a grief I didn't know how to carry. I thought of my mother, not the reality of her death, but the memory of her kindness. How she used to tuck my hair behind my ear, how she smelled like lavender and old books, how she whispered, "You can always come to me when you're hurting." But she wasn't here. She hadn't been for 17 years. And the one parent I had left had chosen someone else, chosen cruelty, chosen denial, chosen Patricia. I pressed my hands to my face and sobbed silently, trying not to wake the boys. Grief pulled through me like a riptide. Grief for what Patricia did, grief for Connor's fear, grief for the father I used to know, grief for a wedding now carved in half. Miguel found me there, shoulders shaking. He knelt at my feet, lifting my chin with gentle fingertips. "You're not alone," he whispered. "I'm right here." I wanted to believe him. But the truth, I had never felt more alone. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, this time with a long email from Marcus. I opened it and felt my heart sink. He defended Patricia, said she had made one mistake, said I was tearing the family apart, said Connor probably provoked her. At the bottom of the email, the words blurred from the tears forming in my eyes. "You need to move on. Move on from child abuse, move on from betrayal, move on from truth." I put the phone down and covered my mouth to hold back a sob so sharp it cut my lungs. Miguel came to me instantly. He didn't ask what was wrong. He could see it in my face. He took the phone, read the message, and whispered, "I'm going to break something." But I wasn't angry. Not in that moment. I was defeated, utterly bone-deep defeated. It felt like the whole world believed Patricia, like I was screaming underwater while everyone above the surface debated whether I should just stop crying and swim. That afternoon, the wedding planner called. "We've had an issue," she said softly. "A woman called claiming to be your stepmother and demanded access to the timeline. She became aggressive when we wouldn't tell her anything." I felt myself freeze. Patricia wasn't letting go. She was circling, waiting. The planner reassured me everything was secure. Vendors had passwords. My instructions were clear. But I heard the tremor in her voice. Everyone could feel the tension now, even people outside the family. I hung up and leaned against the wall, eyes shut tight. It was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. Instead, it felt like the universe was peeling away every illusion I ever had about family, loyalty, safety. And my darkest thought, the one I'd been trying to drown, finally surfaced. Maybe my father never loved me the way I thought. Maybe the version of him I keep defending only existed in my imagination. The weight of that possibility crushed me. This was my bottom, my breaking point. And I didn't know yet that standing on that emotional ledge was the first step toward reclaiming my power. The morning everything began to shift, the house was strangely quiet. Daniel was down for his nap, Connor was coloring at the kitchen table, and Miguel was out front fixing a loose fence board. Sunlight spilled through the windows in soft stripes. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel like it was being squeezed by an invisible fist. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from Marcus. I expected another defense of Patricia, another dismissal of Connor's pain. I almost didn't open it. But something, curiosity, exhaustion, a flicker of hope I wasn't ready to admit to, made me swipe. "Can we meet? Alone. I need to talk to you. It's important." My pulse quickened. Miguel looked uneasy when I told him, but he nodded. "Go," he said, brushing a thumb over my jaw. "If he tries anything, I'm 5 minutes away." The coffee shop was quiet, mostly empty. I chose a table by the window, heart thudding. Marcus walked in 5 minutes later, and he looked ruined. His hair was unkempt, dark circles carved under his eyes, clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. This wasn't the polished, aloof man Patricia had raised to mirror her vanity. This was someone who had just had his world ripped out from under him. He sat down slowly, hands trembling. "Riley," he said, voice rough, "I owe you a massive apology." I blinked. "What?" "I didn't believe you," he said, words tumbling out. "Because I couldn't. Because if I believed you, then I'd have to face who my mother really is, and I wasn't ready." He dragged a hand through his hair. "But I had a fight with her, a big one. He told me everything. How Patricia brought up the restraining order at a family dinner. How she said Connor was manipulative, a liar, a problem. How Marcus, finally fed up, finally pushed too far, demanded the truth. And she said it, he whispered, staring down at the table. She said she hit him, hard, that he deserved it for crying, that he needed to learn respect. I felt the blood drain from my face. Marcus kept going. When I asked her what he did to provoke her, she told me, he cried because he wasn't allowed in the wedding. A 4-year-old, crying, and she hit him for it. His voice cracked. The cafe noise faded into a distant hum. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. She admitted it, he said, meeting my eyes. Word for word. You didn't exaggerate. You didn't twist anything. I defended her against you for months, and she lied to me the whole time. He swallowed hard. And that's when everything in my childhood clicked into place. He told me stories, fragments of memories he'd always brushed off, that suddenly made sense in the harsh light of truth. The girlfriend whose parents suddenly forbade her from seeing him. The job offer that mysteriously fell through after Patricia insisted on talking to the manager. The friends she drove away by whispering lies. The subtle control. The manipulation. The isolation. All patterns of abuse he'd been conditioned not to question. She broke me down for years, he said quietly. I just never saw it until now. He looked up again, eyes red. And Riley, I'm so sorry. For not believing you, for calling you dramatic, for blaming you, for everything. The apology hit me in a place I didn't know was still fragile. For a moment, I couldn't speak. This wasn't just him choosing sides. This was someone waking up from a lifetime of conditioning. It felt monumental. Finally, I said, thank you. It means more than you know. Marcus hesitated before asking the question I'd been expecting. Can I try to be in the boys' lives again? Not right away, not without your permission. But someday? I saw the sincerity in him, the regret, the shift. I'll talk to Miguel, I said gently. But, yes, I think that could happen. Relief flickered across his face. Before we left, he said one final thing. My mother is never going to change, but I am. When I returned home, Miguel was waiting by the door. One look at my face, and he exhaled in disbelief. He owned it? He asked. All of it, I whispered. Miguel pulled me into his arms and held me tight. For the first time in months, the tightness in my chest loosened. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning. For the first time in months, I felt strong. Not because the family was mending, but because I finally understood something deep, painful, and liberating. People will choose who they are, no matter how much you love them. And I could choose who I let into my life. Patricia had shown me who she was. My father had shown me who he chose. Marcus, unexpectedly, had shown me that healing was possible. And I chose my children. I chose Miguel. I chose truth. I chose myself. The wedding was days away. The storm was still circling. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't afraid anymore. The wedding day arrived with an eerie kind of calm, like the quiet after a storm, not because the danger was gone, but because the air was holding its breath. I stood in front of the mirror in my bridal suite, smoothing the lace on my dress, my hands steadier than I expected. Hannah adjusted my veil behind me, her reflection meeting mine with a soft, bittersweet smile. You okay? She asked. I'm peaceful, I said honestly. I didn't think that was possible. Peace looks good on you, she whispered. It did. It felt foreign, but good. Out in the venue courtyard, guests were taking their seats, half as many as the original list, but all people who loved us. People who believed us. People who would protect our boys. The others, the ones who chose my father's narrative, weren't here, and I didn't miss them. Not even a little. We hired security, 2 men in suits stationed at the entrance, checking names and holding copies of the restraining order with Patricia's face printed clearly at the top. It was Hannah's idea. She won't respect boundaries, she warned. You need someone who will enforce them. I hated that she was right. I hated even more that I needed protection on my wedding day. But I wasn't taking chances. Not with my children's safety, not with my peace, not with the life Miguel and I were building. The ceremony itself was magic. Connor held Daniel's hand as they walked down the aisle, their small steps uneven but determined. Daniel kept trying to wave at guests, and Connor kept gently tugging him back toward the path. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Miguel looked at them with a softness so deep I felt it from across the courtyard. When I finally walked toward him, sunlight filtering through the trees, Miguel's eyes filled with tears. Not sadness, gratitude, love, relief. As if he'd been holding his breath for months and could finally exhale. Our vows were simple, heartfelt, whispered with shaking voices. When Miguel said, "You are my home," my knees almost gave out. For one perfect moment, the world was exactly as it should be. But perfection never lasts long where Patricia is involved. Around 7 p.m., after dinner, one of the security guards approached me quietly. "Ma'am," he said in a low tone, "a woman matching the description on the restraining order attempted to enter through the side door." My heart stopped mid-beat. "Is she still here?" Miguel asked sharply, stepping closer. "No," the guard said. "We turned her away. She argued, but eventually left." They hadn't seen my father. They hadn't seen Marcus either. And she hadn't caused a public scene, not yet. But the fact that she came at all, on my wedding day, under legal order not to, was a violation so breathtakingly bold it almost didn't feel real. Miguel gently took my hand. "We're safe," he said. "She's gone." I nodded, but the chill in my spine lingered. I didn't tell Connor. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone until later that night. When the guard walked away, Hannah leaned in and whispered, "I wouldn't put it past her to try again. She can't stand not being the center of attention." No, she couldn't. Not even at the expense of a child's safety. Not even on the day her stepson got married. And for the first time, instead of fear or anger, I felt pity. Patricia had spent her whole life orchestrating events, manipulating people, twisting herself into the illusion of importance. Now she was standing outside my wedding, rejected by everyone, escorted away by security. It was poetic in a way that made my chest ache, not with guilt, but with clarity. Her downfall was her own creation. The next day my father called. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Is it true?" he asked without greeting. "Did Patricia try to come to your wedding?" "Yes," I said quietly. "She just wanted to see her stepson get married," he exploded. "You could have let her stand in the back. You're being unreasonable, Riley." My throat tightened, but my voice came out steady. "Dad, she hit my son." He caught himself, too late. "Not your real son." The sentence he didn't finish rang louder than anything he had said out loud. I inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower. "I'm done, Dad." Silence crackled across the line. Then I hung up. Miguel wrapped an arm around me as I set the phone down. "You didn't lose a father today," he murmured. "He lost you." I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't break. I just breathed. Deep, steady, free. Over the next weeks, the fallout unfolded without my involvement. Family members who sided with my father suddenly had questions, then doubts, then silence. When the truth spread, when people learned Patricia had actually been charged, that the restraining order was real, that the audio existed, they scrambled to backpedal. Some called to apologize, some pretended they'd supported me all along, some vanished entirely. I let all of them go, because anyone who needed proof that a 4-year-old didn't deserve to be hit was not someone I wanted in my life. Patricia's reputation collapsed, slowly and then all at once. Friends distanced themselves, relatives whispered, her social circles shrank. But the greatest consequence was this. For the first time, people saw her clearly. Not the hostess, not the planner, not the perfect wife, but the woman who hurt a child. And for the first time, I saw something clearly too. None of this destruction belonged to me. It belonged to her, and to the man who defended her. I walked away from the wreckage without looking back. The life ahead of me, my marriage, my children, my peace, was too precious to waste on the ruins behind me. In the weeks after the wedding, the world finally felt quiet again. Not the fragile, fearful quiet that follows a blow, but a gentle quiet, a healed quiet, a new beginning kind of quiet. Miguel and I settled into our routines again. Morning chaos with 2 boys, evening cuddles on the couch, slow weekends full of pancakes and crayons and tiny socks that kept disappearing into the dryer. Connor stopped having nightmares. Daniel started saying new words every day. And I, after months of bracing myself for the next crisis, finally let my shoulders soften. The restraining order held. Patricia didn't try to come near us again. My father didn't call. Sometimes I felt the ache of that loss, the echo of what a father should have been. But grief slowly made room for acceptance. Some people choose their darkness. Some people choose denial. Some people choose their abusers because the truth is too heavy for them to carry. But I didn't have to carry their choices anymore. And that realization, it freed something in me I didn't know was trapped. One afternoon, as I was buckling Connor into his car seat, he looked up at me with those big, warm eyes and asked, "Mommy, am I really family?" The question pierced me so deeply my breath caught. I crouched down, cupped his cheeks gently, careful of the faint scar still healing, and said, "You are my son, my real son, forever. Nothing can change that." He smiled, a small, trusting smile, and reached for my necklace like he always did when he wanted comfort. That was the moment I knew I had made the right choices. Every hard confrontation, every painful separation, every line I drew in the sand. I didn't just protect a child. I protected my child. People sometimes say blood is thicker than water. They forget the full saying. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Family isn't the people who share your DNA. It's the people who show up, the people who protect you, the people who choose you, even when it's hard. Patricia chose cruelty. My father chose her. But I chose my children. I chose Miguel. I chose truth. I chose peace. And in choosing all of that, I finally chose myself. If you're watching this and you're standing at the edge of a decision that feels impossible, if you're torn between keeping the peace and telling the truth, if you're afraid that protecting yourself will destroy your family, let me tell you what I learned. The family you lose when you stand up for yourself was never family to begin with. And the peace you gain afterward, it's worth every storm.